Most people don't realize this. The way you speak to yourself determines how your brain wires itself. Words are not just sounds. They are biochemical signals that change your physiology. That inner dialogue running in your head, it's either priming your nervous system for strength or pulling you deeper into stress, distraction, and fatigue. If, for just 3 days, you spoke to yourself intentionally, not as a critic, but as a coach, your nervous system would begin to shift. Your hormones would rebalance, your mindset would recalibrate, and you would feel it, not just mentally, but physically. So here's the experiment. For the next 3 days, you're going to direct your inner voice like it's a training protocol. You're going to engage your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that plans, makes decisions, and controls impulses. And you're going to override the primitive circuitry that keeps you stuck. Speak like a commander. When you wake up, the first words in your mind set the tone for your brain chemistry. Don't let them be accidental. Don't let them be negative. Say this out loud or in your head. I command this day. I control my attention. I control my energy. Why does this matter? Because the brain listens when you speak in absolutes. Clarity creates certainty. Certainty regulates cortisol, your stress hormone. A clear directive from your inner voice tells your brain, we are safe, we are focused, we are in control. You speak in declarative, confident terms. You say things like, I get one step closer today. Discomfort is data, not danger. My future is built by what I do in the next 10 minutes. When your brain hears this kind of language, it adapts. Neural circuits around reward and motivation light up. Dopamine gets released, not just in response to results, but in response to effort. So when you feel fatigue or resistance, you say, this is the rep that builds the new me. Not the easy moment, the hard one. That's when transformation happens. That's when plasticity, the ability of your brain to rewire, kicks in. Speak like a scientist. Day 2 is about observation, precision, no drama. Most of us narrate our lives like it's a tragedy. We say things like, I'm so behind, or nothing's working, or I can't handle this. Those phrases are stress amplifiers. They activate the amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear, and your body goes into defense mode. Instead, speak like a scientist collecting data. Neutral, curious, composed. Instead of I failed, say, interesting. That strategy didn't work. What else can I try? Instead of I'm overwhelmed, say, there's a lot of input right now. Let's triage. This subtle shift from emotional reactivity to objective processing trains your brain to regulate itself. You create a pattern of cognitive control, and the more you do it, the stronger that circuit becomes. It's not denial, it's precision. Precision reduces fear. Clarity reduces stress, and curiosity turns pain into progress. So speak to yourself with clinical self-awareness. Name what's happening, then name what matters next. Your language is the operating system. It rewrites how your nervous system responds to challenge. Speak like a future architect. Now that you've commanded your state and mastered your emotional regulation, the final day is about alignment with your future identity. Because here's the truth. Your brain doesn't change because of what you want. It changes because of who you decide you are. So every time you catch yourself thinking, I hope I can stick with this, you replace it with, I'm the kind of person who finishes what they start. Speak as if you already are the future you. Say, I train daily because it's who I am. I keep promises to myself. I don't fear failure. I engineer feedback. Your identity leads your behavior. Your words sculpt your identity. And your brain is listening every second of the day. Even when you're tired. Even when you feel like quitting. Especially then. Every single thought you have, every word you speak to yourself, carries an electrical charge. Inside your skull, 86 billion neurons are listening. And they're not just listening, they're adapting. Every word is an instruction. Every thought is a message. Your brain responds not to the world as it is, but to the way you describe it. That's why language is so powerful, not just as communication, but as transformation. Because the language you use is literally sculpting the architecture of your mind. When you wake up and say, I'm tired, you're not just observing a state, you're reinforcing it. You're creating neural pathways that associate the beginning of the day with exhaustion. The more you repeat that phrase, the more efficient your brain becomes at producing that experience. But what happens if instead you wake up and say, I command this day? The difference is not poetic, it's physiological. It tells your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for focus and goal-directed behavior, to engage. It tells your limbic system, the emotional brain, to fall in line. That simple shift in phrasing begins a cascade of changes in attention, in perception, and in hormonal release. Your nervous system is obedient. It's not interested in what's true. It's interested in what's repeated. This means the way you talk to yourself becomes the blueprint your brain builds on. If you constantly say, "I'm not good at this," the brain starts wiring toward avoidance. Your neurons interpret that statement as a fact. They adapt your response to ensure you stay away from what you're not good at. But if you say, "I'm learning fast," even in the face of failure, your brain adapts to seek mastery. It will start producing the dopamine you need to push through discomfort, because now it believes the effort is worth it. And it only believes that because you told it so. People think motivation starts with energy. They're wrong. Motivation starts with language. When you tell yourself, "Let's go," you're not just hyping yourself up. You're activating motor neurons. You're increasing sympathetic tone. You're generating readiness. But if you say, "I can't," even quietly in your mind, you shut that whole system down. Your sympathetic nervous system downshifts. Your muscles lose tension. Your focus fragments. One phrase changes your entire physical state. You were not born with fixed mental states. You train them. And you train them through the sentences you speak internally, often unconsciously. That's why for 3 days you have to become intensely intentional about your inner dialogue. Don't let your mind run on autopilot. Take control of the script. Talk to yourself like a coach, not a critic. Like a leader, not a victim. Like a commander, not a bystander. When elite military units go through extreme physical and psychological pressure, they don't rely on emotion to carry them. They rely on internal protocols, language patterns that signal the brain to lock in. Control your breath. One more rep. You're built for this. These aren't motivational slogans, they're neural commands. They keep the body in fight mode, not flight. They regulate adrenaline and increase resilience. You can use the same system. You don't need a boot camp. You need a mouth that knows what to say and a mind that listens. If you want to shift your energy, don't wait for the feeling. Speak the direction. Say, "I have energy," even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's when the brain is most plastic. In states of challenge, your neural circuits are searching for direction. If you speak with clarity, they'll adapt to that signal. If you speak with doubt, they'll adapt to that too. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about programming your system to respond in ways that serve your goals. When a pilot gives a command to the cockpit, the plane adjusts course. Your brain works the same way, but you have to issue the command. And the clearer the command, the more accurate the adjustment. Imagine you're going into a workout and the voice in your head says, "I'm not strong enough today." That sentence might feel harmless, but it's a biological instruction. Your body interprets it as a signal to conserve effort. You produce less adrenaline, less testosterone, less force output. You've already lost, and you haven't even started. But if you say, "This is where I get stronger," your brain primes itself for growth. It increases norepinephrine, narrows your focus, and commits resources to performance. All from a phrase. All from a few words spoken with conviction. There's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's responsible for error detection, conflict monitoring, and cognitive control. When you give it positive, assertive language, it lights up and tells the rest of the brain, "Stay the course, push through." But when you give it anxious, uncertain language, it alerts the system that something is wrong. That's why people who constantly say, "I don't know if I can do this," often feel paralyzed. It's not because they can't, it's because their words are signaling conflict, and the brain's response to conflict is hesitation. You don't need a perfect mindset, you need a practiced vocabulary. Start with short commands. Go, move, show up, breathe. Speak them like you mean them. Don't mumble. Don't apologize to yourself. Be direct, be forceful, not angry. Clear. Command tones activate the vagus nerve in a way that reduces anxiety and increases presence. You ground yourself by speaking with authority. The reason so many people feel mentally weak isn't because they are. It's because they've let their inner dialogue become sloppy, undisciplined, full of qualifiers and fear. If you walked around saying out loud what you say internally, you'd realize how much of it is self-sabotage. "I'm just not a morning person. I can't focus today. This is too hard." You wouldn't speak that way to a child you love, so why speak it to your own brain? There's another level to this. Your brain listens not only to what you say, but how you say it. Tone, rhythm, intensity, they all matter. If you whisper, "I'm strong," your nervous system won't believe you. But if you stand up, breathe deep, and say it with certainty, your physiology changes instantly. Your posture improves, your oxygen uptake increases, your spine elongates. That's not theory. It's somatic feedback. The body follows language, and language shapes the body. Every great performer, athlete, creator, warrior, every single one of them has mastered self-talk, not because they were born with confidence, but because they practiced it over and over until their inner voice became an asset, not a liability. You don't get confidence from success, you get it from repetition. Repetition of thought, repetition of word, repetition of command. 3 days. That's all it takes to begin, to wake up and say, let's go. To feel resistance and say, this is where I grow. To look in the mirror and say, I'm not waiting, I'm becoming. You do it again and again, and your brain rewires. The synapses change, the chemicals change, the behaviors change. And here's the secret. Your brain doesn't care if you believe it at first. All it needs is repetition, consistency, a clear, firm voice saying, we move forward no matter what. That's how soldiers are trained. That's how champions are made. That's how change happens. There is no better time than now to become conscious of your language, to use words not as decoration, but as direction. Don't let your inner voice be accidental. Make it intentional. Command your mind, and your life will follow. Stress isn't the enemy, it's information. The real problem is how you interpret that information. When your nervous system encounters challenge, uncertainty, or discomfort, it starts scanning for context. And what gives it context? Your language. The words you use to describe what you feel are the instructions your brain follows. That's why vague, emotional language amplifies stress, but precise, intentional language regulates it. The more accurately you can name your internal state, the more power you have over it. Precision over emotion isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about transforming your relationship to them. When your heart starts racing, your breathing quickens, and your thoughts feel chaotic, your body is in a high arousal state. That's not good or bad, it's simply activation. But the story you attach to that activation will determine whether your brain classifies it as a threat or a challenge. Say to yourself, I'm anxious, and your brain moves toward avoidance. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and control. But if you say instead, my body is preparing to take action, the brain responds completely differently. It recruits resources, it leans in. The same physiological symptoms, but now they're seen as fuel. There's a network in the brain called the default mode network, and one of its primary jobs is to generate emotional narratives. It's active when you ruminate, when you worry, when you dwell on the past or anticipate the worst. But when you get precise, when you name what's actually happening, the brain shifts out of that mode. It engages the executive network instead. That's the system responsible for focus, action, and problem solving. And the key that turns that switch is language. Not reactive language, not dramatic language, clear, specific language. Imagine you're about to give a presentation. Your hands are sweating, your stomach tightens, your thoughts feel scrambled. If you label that experience as, I'm falling apart, or I hate this feeling, you're giving the brain a threat signal. It will try to protect you by freezing, by disconnecting, by withdrawing. But if you say, my body is alert, or this is adrenaline helping me focus, you're using precision. And that precision gives you access to control because now your brain sees a purpose in the stress. This is not a mental trick. It's biology. When you use accurate, calm language in the face of stress, you activate the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. This area sends signals to the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, to turn down its volume. You literally regulate the emotional intensity by the words you choose. And you increase activity in areas that help you adapt and respond skillfully. Precision is power. Think of an elite surgeon in the operating room. The patient's life is in the balance. The stakes are high, but there is no panic, no guessing. Every movement, every instruction is exact. That's how you must train your inner world to operate under pressure, with accuracy, with intention, with clarity. That's not coldness, that's mastery. Mastery over the mind, mastery over impulse, mastery over reactivity. Now contrast that with what most people do under stress. They catastrophize. This is a disaster. I can't handle this. Everything's falling apart. These aren't observations, they're accelerants. Every time you use language like that, you're pouring fuel on the fire. You're reinforcing neural pathways that associate challenge with collapse. But if you learn to describe what's happening without exaggeration, you interrupt that loop. Instead of, I'm overwhelmed, you say, there are multiple inputs competing for attention. That phrase might sound robotic, but to the brain, it's grounding. It tells the system, this isn't chaos, it's complexity, and complexity can be complexity. and complexity can be managed. The more emotionally precise you become, the less power your stress responses have over you. And that's not because you're avoiding emotion, it's because you're organizing it. You're converting raw affect into structured thought. That's what cognitive control really is. It's not suppression, it's regulation. It's taking what feels chaotic and turning it into a format your brain can work with. People often say, "I'm stuck in my head." What they mean is that their thoughts are swirling without direction. And usually that swirl is fueled by emotionally loaded language. "I can't do this. This always happens to me. Why can't I figure it out?" These are loops. They don't solve anything. They just reinforce the problem. But if you ask yourself instead, what exactly is happening right now, and answer with precision, "I feel tension in my chest," or "I'm thinking about what could go wrong," you create a shift. You activate what's called interoceptive awareness, your brain's ability to read signals from within your body. That awareness creates a buffer between sensation and reaction. When you become precise with language, you also slow down the speed of your thinking. That's crucial. Stress accelerates cognition. It makes your mind race, but the more it races, the less it sees. You start missing options, forgetting tools, overlooking solutions. But when you get specific, when you name the experience with accurate, grounded language, you slow the loop. You reduce cortical noise. And in that clarity, options appear. There's another benefit to this approach: trust. When you consistently speak to yourself with precision under pressure, your brain starts to trust your leadership. That sounds strange, but it's true. Your subconscious learns this person knows how to guide us through difficult terrain. And with that trust comes stability. Confidence isn't built on positive affirmations. It's built on repeated evidence that when things get hard, you don't crumble, you get clear. Over time, this becomes automatic. You train your brain to default to precision, not panic. You walk into a stressful situation and instead of reacting, you assess, you label, you adjust. You might still feel the heat, but now you're directing the fire instead of getting burned by it. It's also important to understand that emotional intensity is not always the enemy, but imprecision is. You can feel deeply and still operate with clarity. In fact, high performers do this all the time. They don't numb out their feelings, they just organize them. They recognize I feel pressure, and then they ask, what does that pressure want me to do? And then they act from that insight, not from chaos. Think of this as building a user manual for your own nervous system. The more you name your inner states precisely, the more you learn how to navigate them. Stress becomes a message, not a monster. You hear it, you understand it, and you respond in ways that move you forward. There's a phrase in neuroscience, name it to tame it. It means that by labeling an emotion, you decrease its grip on the brain. That's not just a poetic idea. Functional MRI studies show reduced amygdala activation and increased prefrontal activity when subjects accurately name their feelings. Your words change your brain state. Your vocabulary is not just communication, it's self-regulation. So if you want to become mentally stronger, emotionally steadier, and more in control under stress, don't try to eliminate feeling. Eliminate vagueness. Replace dramatics with definitions. Instead of saying, I'm freaking out, say, my mind is scanning for threat and predicting outcomes. That may not feel as cathartic in the moment, but it trains your system for clarity. And clarity under pressure is what separates chaos from composure. Precision is a skill, and like any skill, it requires repetition. You don't develop it by reading quotes or hearing a talk. You develop it by practicing. In the heat of stress, stop yourself. Interrupt the story and ask, what exactly am I feeling? Where is it in my body? What triggered it? What meaning am I assigning to it? Answer those questions with honest, grounded words. And then decide what action aligns with who you want to be, because that's the real power here. When you speak with precision, you don't just manage stress, you shape your identity. You become the kind of person who responds, not reacts, who thinks clearly under fire, who leads their own mind instead of being led by it. That's not philosophy, that's neurobiology. That's the result of structure replacing story, of detail replacing drama. The world will not get easier, the pressure will not disappear, but you can become stronger, calmer, and more effective in the face of it. And the gateway to that shift is not found in escape, it's found in your vocabulary. Talk to yourself with precision. The brain listens, and when it hears clarity, it gives you control. There's a neural principle you must understand if you're serious about growth. The brain is constantly predicting your future based on how you define your present. It doesn't operate purely on what is, it builds what will be from the internal signals you give it daily. And those signals are shaped most powerfully by the words you speak, especially to yourself. Every time you talk, you're casting a vote for who you are becoming. You're reinforcing the structure of identity, either one you're trying to escape or one you're trying to build. This is the mechanism by which growth occurs, not through sudden leaps, but through consistent redefinition. You don't have to feel fully aligned with the words at first. That's not the point. The point is to speak from alignment with where you're headed, not where you're stuck. Your nervous system learns through repetition. It needs to hear the new script enough times to weaken the old one. Your identity is not fixed, it's constructed. It's not some static, innate truth buried inside you. It's a reflection of repeated patterns, thoughts, behaviors, and yes, language. If you consistently say, "I'm not good at that," your brain begins to prune the neurons associated with confidence in that area. If you tell yourself, "I'm not a morning person," you reinforce sleep inertia pathways. But if you speak from a future version of yourself, the one you're training to become, the brain starts rewiring toward that image. This is not wishful thinking. This is how neuroplasticity works. Your brain changes in response to focused, consistent input. There's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It tracks conflict between intention and action. When you say one thing and do another, this area lights up. It creates discomfort. But that discomfort is useful. It's the fuel of behavior change. It tells the brain something's out of sync. And if you don't numb or ignore that signal, you can harness it. You can move toward congruence. Your job is to keep speaking from your future identity until your behavior catches up, until the two are no longer in conflict. Let's be clear. Speaking from your future identity is not about lying to yourself. It's not about saying, "I'm rich" when your bank account is empty, or "I'm confident" when you're trembling inside. It's about stating what you are in the process of becoming. There's a difference between fantasy and formation. One escapes reality, the other reshapes it. When you say, "I'm training to be a person who handles pressure with calm," you're not denying the stress you feel. You're directing your system toward a new response pattern. Let's get precise. When you speak from your future identity, you activate what's called top-down processing. That's when the brain uses goals and beliefs to shape perception and behavior. Instead of being driven by habit, you become directed by intention. The simple phrase, "I'm the kind of person who," followed by an action aligned with your desired future, creates neural alignment. Say it enough and the brain starts allocating energy toward making it true. This matters because your language doesn't just influence motivation, it changes what your brain pays attention to. There's a system in the brain called the reticular activating system, RAS. It acts like a filter. It determines what information gets passed up into conscious awareness, and guess what programs that filter? Your internal dialogue. When you keep telling yourself, "I'm lazy," the RAS tunes your attention to behaviors and moments that support that belief. But when you say, "I'm becoming more consistent," it begins looking for evidence to support that. It shifts your focus. It moves the goalposts. Every system in your body responds to language, hormones, heart rate, immune function, all of it. And when your words align with your desired identity, the system optimizes for that trajectory. Cortisol levels drop, dopamine pathways activate, the body begins to believe the future is possible and prepares to act accordingly. Think of language like architecture. Every sentence is a blueprint. When you repeatedly speak from your past or your limitations, you build walls, you reinforce confinement. But when you speak from your future, what you're training toward, you build scaffolding. You create structure that can support the growth of new patterns. This is how real change happens. It's not through willpower alone. It's through identity construction. And that construction happens word by word. Imagine someone trying to become more disciplined. If they say, "I always procrastinate," they're reinforcing the current wiring. But if they say, "I'm becoming the kind of person who does the hard thing first," they begin to shift the default mode of behavior. Not because it magically changes how they feel, but because it starts creating prediction error in the brain. The brain expects one behavior based on past patterns, but hears a different script. That mismatch triggers plasticity. The system adapts. One of the most powerful ways to accelerate this process is through intentional rehearsal. Every morning, take 60 seconds and say out loud who you're becoming. Not who you hope to be, not who you wish you were, but who you're training to embody. Be specific, be clear. "I'm becoming a person who keeps promises to themselves. I'm the kind of person who finishes what they start. I train my focus, I manage my energy, I lead my mind." This is an empty affirmation. This is neural priming. You are activating circuits before the day demands them. You must also monitor the casual language you use throughout the day. Every time you say, I'm just not that type of person, your brain takes it literally. It creates constraints around behavior. But when you shift to, I'm learning to be the type of person who, you open those circuits. You create possibility. Even if you fall short of the behavior in the moment, the blueprint remains, and the more you refer to it, the more the brain constructs around it. This principle works both ways. If you repeatedly speak from fear, limitation, or defeat, your brain will start building an identity around that. That's why it's not just about positive thinking, it's about precise identity-based language. Don't just say, I want to be focused. Say, I train my mind to focus like a craftsman trains his hands. Don't just say, I hope I stay calm. Say, I practice composure under pressure. That phrasing tells the brain, this is who I am, this is what we're building. And the system responds. The prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain responsible for executive function, planning, decision-making, and impulse control. When you speak from your future identity, you're reinforcing prefrontal dominance. You're quieting the limbic system, the emotional